the idea that you could just go forever and then because just like the 2008 collapse in the movie The Big Short, through some nefarious trades and your whole fund is wiped out. Now that is not fear mongering. It's just prudent for a state to put X amount of their assets into precious metals.
Are you ready for Silver Squeeze 2.0? We could see skyrocketing silver prices. Today, we're joined by Jon Little. He's working with a Reddit group called the Silver Degen Club. They've developed a plan where we could potentially see Silver Squeeze 2.0 hashtag drain the mint. It has to do with the US Mint. Jon is an accomplished author and analyst, and we're really fortunate to have him with us today. Welcome to Ron's Basement, Jon.
It's good to be back 2 days in a row. I mean, it went so well yesterday that it's good to be back. So again,
well, you need a good night's sleep after you spend some time here in the basement. So
I wasn't going to say it. I wasn't going to say that, but thank you.
Yeah. So we have a potential for another silver squeeze, and there's a plan, and there's some smart guys behind it. Is that correct?
Yes. In absence of me, there are some smart people behind this. I'm more or less their scribe. Every good movement needs a scribe, so I'm documenting furiously. Basically, the background is, I think all of us that are watching this broadcast, they do remember there was a Reddit group called Wall Street Silver, and it sort of flamed out ingloriously. And I won't get into that, but I think we published 4 or 5 articles on why. But we've moved past that. So now their plan was Silver Squeeze. And it was a good setup for what we're now calling Silver Squeeze 2.0. But there was some flawed methodology with the first one. And Dumb Money Media has just recently released a 2-minute video that explains how it works. And if I can just walk through the storyboard real quickly, basically, when you had a campaign called Drain the COMEX, we learned that there were some issues with that strategy or methodology, because years ago, the COMEX merged with the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and at that point formed a monopoly where agricultural, metals, currency, futures were all wrapped into one entity. And this led to a monopoly, which anytime there's a monopoly, we know that transparency is sacrificed. So when you see all the time on Twitter what the COMEX levels are, no one can trust those numbers. So the other problem with the methodology is, and he sort of shows that when you're buying from a variety of dealers and local coin shops, that a lot of the transactions go in a circle. So you buy from a dealer, the dealer sells to another dealer, then there's a coin show in your local area. Here in Pittsburgh, I just went to one and there was 20 tables. And it appears that a lot of people are sort of just swapping silver and gold back and forth amongst one another in a circular tautology. And it's just a slow drip of the COMEX. So the new strategy really is to now sort of point to the US Mint. And yes, we all fear the premiums, but if you think of the premiums as sort of like the difference between a Chevy Cruze and a Honda, the Honda has good resale value, whereas the Chevy Cruze, and I apologize to anyone that may have that car, I'm sure it's a fine car. But what I'm saying is there are some products that have higher resale value. So anyway, the strategy is buy from the mint, and then the mint by statute pulls directly from the COMEX. So that's basically a hashtag drain the mint. I encourage you to go to Reddit/Silver Degen Club, where there's much more collateral and tutorials. The Canadian Hunter made a 2-minute video, Conrad, Dumb Money Media, and he's got some content generators. And then Illuminated Ape went extensively into silver's use to nuclear applications, military applications. And as we spoke about previously or yesterday, we're in we have negative supply of silver. So if we can create an environment where there's public outcry, when the mint has to throw up their hands and say, we can't meet demand, that will be sort of like the first moment where maybe the Wall Street Journal picks up on it, and then the next week Politico, and then the next week Bloomberg. So we're trying to create that sort of public outcry to spark awareness, meanwhile draining the COMEX more efficiently, and also ditching the old plan that sort of led to that slow drip versus, we had this great graphic of a magnet just sucking the trucks right out of the COMEX and smashing into the mint, in order to just have a little more streamlined and unilateral approach.
So the US Mint is legally obligated? Is that, or by statute obligated?
Yeah, the
to
US Mint is supposed to meet the demand. It's under the Department of Treasury. There's a statute, and I'm sorry, it's like 501. It almost sounds like a 501c3, which is a nonprofit statute, but it's all in the article that's down here, as well as Dumb Money Media's 2-minute tutorial. And then there's also a 2-hour or an hour and 45-minute video where Illuminated Abe really gets into the nuts and bolts of his research.
And talks with Andy Scheckman, correct?
Correct. Yeah, they go. Yeah. That's correct. I've watched it a couple of times. But
so
at that point, I said, let's do a 2-minute video based on the sort of the basics of sales, that if you can't convey your point in the, the span of even an elevator ride, which is 30 seconds, then people tune in.
The idea here is to force the US Mint to supply the adequate number of American Silver Eagles that are being demanded or will be demanded as a result of this hashtag Drain the Mint movement from the public. Something's going to have to happen, right? Because there's this arrangement they have with Sunshine Mint where they get their planchettes from Sunshine Mint, and the Mint is saying, well, we can't buy the planchettes. Is there some like solidifying event that's going to have to occur? Because at this point, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just as an observer giving you my observations, it feels like the Mint just says, well, we can't get the planchets for the right price, so we can't make the coins. Is there some solidifying event that will occur that could force them to have to address this? Either claim force majeure, I guess you would almost say, or say, okay, we're going to go about this in a different way and get the silver directly from the COMEX. That seems like that's the intention of the movement.
Okay, right. Those are the questions I asked, and they've been answered. So about August 25th in 2022, there's a rep out of West Virginia named Alex Moody, and he's actually now running for Senate, but he's also the one that's been representing or advancing legislation for sound money. And he wrote a bill to return to a gold-backed standard, which we all know will go nowhere, but it's important symbolically to, and there's a company called, a nonprofit called the Sound Money Defense League, not to be confused with the evil imitator called Citizens for Sound Money, but this is the Sound Money Defense League, and they're zealous in getting state by state state house and rep members to introduce bills such as you should introduce silver and gold as part of your public employee retirement accounts. You should introduce silver and gold as being exempt from state or from sales tax, and a variety of legislation that advance the causes of sound money. And so anyway, Alex Moody wrote a letter to the Mint director and copied Janet Yellen, because the Mint's under the jurisdiction of the Department of Treasury, and asked those very questions, like, why are you only using Sunshine Mint? That's the no-brainer question. I was like, you don't have anyone like, and they pointed to some of their peers, like the Royal Canadian Mint, the Austrian Philharmonic, whoever makes those. South Africa has the Krugerrand, UK has the Britannia, right? All the sovereign coins. And they had case studies that all of these mints run their operation to be able to meet public demand much better than the US mint, which again, it proves that the US government doesn't really want silver and gold to be money, because they don't want anything competing with their pieces of paper, right?
Let me interrupt, because I want to reiterate, you bring up a great point, and something that I probably have heard, but I think reintroduced into my awareness level. The Australian mint, the South African mint, the UK mint, they have no problem meeting demand, right? The Armenian mint that makes the Noah's Arks.
Right.
Why does the United States mint have such a problem meeting demand?
Because they want to bake into the cake this excuse that we can't source the planchettes, which means blanks.
Mm-hmm.
So because the overarching paradigm is they can't go on record admitting that silver is money because it competes with the US dollar, just like the BRICS we talked about yesterday, right? So it's basically a showdown. If you were to look at the bipolar, we used to have what was called a unipolar world with the US dollar. But now if you introduce silver and gold as competition for the fiat US dollar, they want to have this sort of Keystone Cops, what you call do you know what a Rube Goldberg machine is?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Every viewers, you can Google it, but it's basically sort of a jalopy sort of way of doing things that has to do with a lot of contraptions. And this is sort of the dysfunction and pathology baked into their methodology. And all the strategists of this during the mint are saying is, let's call their bluff and let's buy these American Silver Eagles. And yes, there's a premium, but there is on the back end liquidity or the resale that you also, your LCS gives you more money for them too.
Sure.
So there is a bit of a sacrifice there, but that's just short term. It's a strategy to call their bluff and get them to admit their failures. And now there's a new article in the Pickaxe that shows the original letter by Moody to the mint director. Gibson is his last name, and copies Janet Yellen. And then it has their reply a month later. And it's basically asking them, why can't you do it the way it's done efficiently? Why are you just relying on this, the Sunshine Mint? Why don't you have a variety of providers of these blanks? What happens if Illuminated Ape asked the great question of to Chat GPT, he goes, explain to me as if I'm 5 years old, what happens if the secretary is bad at her job or they fail to answer to the demand of the public? And it actually goes through those scenarios that it would basically spark a public outcry and sort of create a panic, because it's like, if we need silver as a strategic metal, what are you trying to tell the military too, that there isn't enough silver to make your bullets, shells, missiles, night vision goggles, all the nuclear powered submarines? Some use, we're talking millions of tons each, especially because the batteries have to go through. You got to have a submarine ready to go, and it could be mothballed for decades, right? But and if you think of it like a cruise missile or an intercontinental ballistic missile going through space, those are severe conditions, and only silver is the only anti-corrosive metal that's also the best conductor of electricity. So the Illuminated Apes plan is to call their bluff, thus sparking the public outcry, thus creating the media attention, because channels like yours and the Pickaxe and the Silver Degen Club, we're all in the minority. We're just sort of these fringe people, but enough of these voices creating a solidarity movement, like any time in history. No one would have thought that Paul Revere and his ragtag group could have overthrown the British crown either. underdogs do it every single time because they have the numbers and all they need is the fight and a plan. So we just didn't have a plan. We were sort of shooting in the dark. And there's nothing wrong with buying silver. Generic rounds are awesome. Get your weight up. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem was that the old plan was just not targeted enough to create the media attention or the public outcry or get them to admit that they're not doing their job.
Or,
I mean,
or let me circle back here, and I want to make this clear. I think we need to explain this to the viewers that maybe don't understand. The U.S. Mint does not buy big silver bars. The U.S. Mint buys what are called planchets, which are blank. This is not a planchet, that's a round, but it's a blank round piece of silver that's very specifically measured, and it's the raw material that then the mint uses to stamp out the American silver eagles. Is the issue in that is the mint claiming, because I've heard this and I'd like your commentary on this, that the mint is claiming, well, we can't get the planchets from Sunshine Mint, or we can't get them at the right price. Is that part of their excuse for
they have a
non-performance?
Excuses. I urge everyone to go to the Pickaxe and read the article just posted today, and it starts with the presenting problem, and it archives the original letter that Congressman Moody from West Virginia wrote to Janet Yellen, and their lame response that's full of, like any other legal argument, it's open to interpretation. Mm-hmm. So I can't think of a law where you get a room full of lawyers in there and they may be able to interpret. You'll see that it's a very worthless document, a very good document that Moody wrote, but a very worthless document that the Mint came back with.
Well, let me ask you this question, John. Because if price is an issue for the Mint, they're claiming, what if the statutes were changed, the laws were changed, that the Mint could pay more for these planchets? They're available, right? I mean, the UK Mint, they're only saying, well, we only can get them from Sunshine Mint. What if, and I'm throwing out one more what if hypothetically, what if I started, Ron's planchet company, and I started buying 1,000-ounce bars off the COMEX and creating my own planchets and made them available to the U.S. Mint, and they met their specifications? Does that, at some point,
that's feasible. That is feasible, and that's what we want them to admit. Acknowledge. We want them to admit, first of all, in a way, it also backs them in the corner over price discovery. For instance, your friend that came on the show that I watched, Keith Neumeyer, he mints. We're not sure who he uses. I'm not sure if that's transparent, but I know that he has rounds that he stamps his First Majestic logo on, as well as 10-ounce bars. There's Andrew owns a company called, it's not Mint State Gold, but it's the opposite of that, Golden State Mint. There's the Scottsdale Mint, right? I've seen guys on like GG Bullion. We've seen a bunch of people minting. There's really, I think it does speak to the fact that there's, just like we talked about 24 hours ago, that there's this massive shortage of silver, and we want to force their hand, call their bluff, and get them to admit it. And we know they never will, but a good reporter that picks up on the story and keeps pressing, it'll be like death by 1,000 cuts. We want to see it go through the news cycle. We know that mainstream media, the domestic media in the United States, is extremely weak at pressing the government on anything that has to do with monetary policy, especially when it comes to silver and gold, because you and I talked about this yesterday, that they always bash on it because they can't admit that it's money. So it's used by gangsters and pirates and drug dealers, right? That's right. Yeah. And now that's how you're going to buy your weed, and that's how you're going to do any pernicious, nefarious, and unscrupulous thing will be done with silver, and we we've seen gold confiscation happen not that long ago, right?
Yeah.
There's arguments for silver confiscation if the military can't make their bombs, and there's those, so we want.
I want to throw one more thing at you and get your opinion on this. It just came to mind. Is Sunshine Mint possibly in cahoots with the U.S. Mint on this? I mean, are they beholden to them and maybe somehow benefiting and, part of the scheme if
You could
there
look at
was
it
a
this
scheme?
way. I think that I've never thought of that, but I'm just going to riff off the top of my head. Why do you think sometimes OPEC says we're cutting production when they have their meeting?
Right.
They do it to get the price up, right? But the problem is with silver, which is always hammered down mostly because of the future swaps, the paper derivatives, and the fact that industrialists don't want their factory inputs to rise. So there's sort of a conundrum there. Are they going to go to the letter of the law saying that they are by statute supposed to meet public demand? Or are they going to somehow through this Rube Goldberg, and we know that the government all the time has a horde of conflicting, overlapping, and duplication of bureaus. Why isn't, I don't know, it could lead to the discussion that maybe parts of the silver supply should be nationalized, but would that create panic with the junior mining stocks? And I am only just thinking out loud. I've never, you could chase any of these down a rabbit hole and come up with many arguments of why there's no transparency regarding the statute. Go ahead.
If we zoom out, and you touched on this earlier, but I think it bears that we revisit this briefly. If you zoom out and you go back to 1971, when silver and gold were basically, can we say, demonetized here in the United States, we went off the gold standard, right? This is my opinion, and I think this possibly relates to what's going on. At that point, to me, it's kind of like a divorce, right? I mean, Nixon, we took the backing, gold backing out of the dollar. At that point, it's like a divorce. The U.S. government doesn't want, I'd always heard, oh, gold is kryptonite to the dollar. It never really made sense. But when I realized, when they said, well, you know what, we aren't backing the dollar with gold or silver, right? They took silver out of the coins. At that point, they really do have, and it's like a divorce, like if you sell a stock, usually if you sell a stock, if you're a normal human, you don't want to see it do really well and shoot to the moon. You sold it, or it's like a divorce. Usually people that there's the government on a much higher level really does have an interest in silver and gold. We're talking more silver here, but that has an interest in, for lack of a better way to say it, tamping down the value, because if they do well, that makes this paper imaginary fiat dollar look bad.
You're very gifted at these analogies because your whiskey one was awesome. This one's even better.
Well,
you're
my new best friend, John.
Well, I've been divorced before, and I'll tell you what happened. I swear, within months, this is right when Facebook started, and I could see my ex-wife, and all of a sudden, she looked like a supermodel. I mean, it was just, and then it's just like, oh my God, it's that feeling of I can't recognize in seeing them, checking into new restaurants. Her new boyfriend was better, being taller, more powerful. So if you take that analogy, why is gold and silver the anti-dollar? I think it's easy we could say it in maybe 5 bullet points. Well, the dollar is tethered to the quantitative easing and printing. Moreover, it's also tied to fractional reserve banking. Okay, so fractional reserve banking, there used to be this reserve requirement where if Ron deposits $1,000 in his local bank, they used to have to be, it was convertible, right, to gold and silver, or they had to have some reserve. But when COVID started, it turned into zero. There is no reserve requirement for the banks anymore. So that's the second reason why. Third, with all the crazy derivative trading, gold and silver keeps that honest. And then I would say, I'll just go with 4, that by closing the gold window, it was able for politicians to get into these crazy, bloodthirsty, this is what brought Rome down, was that lust for wars as a way to expand your empire. And the way a war works is you extract the natural resources of the loser. It could be bananas in Honduras, oil in Iraq. US stole the gold of Gaddafi's Libya, just like Cortez stole the Aztecs' gold, just like Pizarro stole the Incas' gold. You know, it's the oldest playbook. To the spoils go the winner, and then enslave the losers in some sort of debt slavery. So it's similarly, if the ruling class can keep us middle class, lower class, or the 99% in to die from the insidious inflation tax, which is basically taxation without representation. They don't even have to pass a bill, right? They can just print new money. Now you're working harder for less purchasing power. So they cannot have gold and silver fight that. And that is why we want to use drain the mint as just as it's a piece of strategy that allows us to, maybe there'll be a good Seymour Hersh, if you're listening, to do an investigative news piece on this, because this will have to go beyond the pickaxe, Ron's basement, Silver Degen Club, but it has been picked up just last week by silverseek.com, goldseek.com, Andy Scheckman, and there's a lot of Canadians that if you go to Drain the Mint, hashtag Drain the Mint, either on Google or Twitter, you're going to start seeing it's becoming infectious, just like Silver Squeeze was. This is just Silver Squeeze 2.
John, you wait till this video airs, right? We're going to be the lead story on CNBC.
Yeah, that's right.
We got a week from Monday.
Yeah. So Anderson Cooper, we know you're, I think, the heir of the Vanderbilt enterprise. Please have us on. You know, Anderson, before he got hired, just started shooting his own videos. Did you know that? Just like you, Ron.
Well, you never know.
It's all guerrilla marketing. And we believe that David and Goliath dynamic has much more power. Grassroots are always stronger than sort of these organized That's why no one listens to the fake news cycle. But go ahead.
Yeah. And before I forget, John, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to throw this in because I think you partially touched on this. I think it's important for the viewers to remember that the framers of the United States Constitution explicitly put in our Constitution that silver and gold are the only real forms of money. So when we talk about our mint, our U.S. mint, providing the U.S. citizenry with an adequate amount of silver coinage, which they are by statute required to do, we aren't doing anything wrong. You know, I was involved a little bit with this movement that really started to gain steam last year throughout the country, where there were a bunch of states that passed legal tender legislation. Kansas, Missouri, unfortunately, didn't work out, but we had a number of Tennessee. We got a lot of states now that passed. And you know, it's like you kind of feel a little like, oh, I'm not that I'm doing anything wrong, but like I'm a outcast or whatever. Like, no, our founding fathers put this in the Constitution, and they did it for a reason, right? That worshipped document. That, you know, what we're doing here is standing up for, you know, what our founding fathers would be proud of us for what we're doing.
Yeah, I have an 86-year-old mother still, and she's on Social Security. And what you talked about state to state, yesterday we hinted on that Stephen Gleason is he's a genius. He's the one that really launched this Sound Money Defense League, and they are effectively lobbying each state. They don't care if it's as small as New Mexico. They'll talk to anyone, fly down there, go to lunch and say, introduce this bill. It's already written up for them. And like you said, there are states where it usually goes through one house and then it may get stalled out in the next. But let's just take pension funds, because I brought up my mom. If you pay all your life into a pension, yet some of these huge institutional investors like the California Public Employee Retirement Account, every single state has their own what's called a PERA, public employment retirement account, for teachers, firemen, police, and some of us, unfortunately, don't work for municipalities or state governments. But the idea that you could just go forever, and then because just like the 2008 collapse in the movie The Big Short, through some nefarious trades and your whole fund is wiped out. Now, that is not fear mongering. It's just prudent for a state to put X amount of their assets into precious metals. I mean, I don't know what that percentage is. I think it's a big number. I would say it's north of 20%. You can't even get them right now. It's less than 1%.
Sure.
So and the mean has been up as high as 3%. Right now it's a 0.5%. So by doing that, from going 0.5% to 3%, you've just now squeezed silver more by a function of 6 times. Just to have insurance companies, they've got to pay out, they've collect premiums, they got to pay out the life insurance benefit and the pension funds. Let's get into, we can all write letters to our public employee retirement accounts and say, hey, you may want to look at sound money, silver and gold in your vaults. They all have a depository.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I like
what
to
happened
think.
in Missouri, did you say?
Did not pass SB 100. Great friend of mine, Pat Holland, was kind of leading that charge. But I think we'll be up for the fight again next year. I want to touch on this quick story when you talk about pension funds, and I like to think of my grandpa in 1955. If he needed to get a haircut, it cost about $1, right? And if 1 month, he was due for his haircut and he was getting ready to head to the barber, and he said, you know what, I'm going to skip my haircut this month. And he stuck $1 in his pocket. If in his right pocket, he stuck a paper dollar, and in his left pocket, option 2 would have been he stuck a silver dollar, right? And then unfortunately, 2 days later, he passed away of a heart attack. His pants got put in the closet. Grandma lived another 50 years. I'm over there yesterday cleaning out the house, and I find Grandpa's pants that have been sitting there for 55 years. If he had done option 1 and put a paper dollar in that pocket, I got $1, right? Which, what can I do with $1? I can't buy anything at McDonald's, nothing at the dollar store anymore, right? If he had done option 2 and put a silver dollar in the other pocket, and I pull that silver dollar out, I can still go get a $25 haircut with that silver dollar, right? Obviously, I'll have to convert it to fiat, but because of the silver, and I wanted that your example about the pension fund had me thinking of that. Thank you, John. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
The movement is #DrainTheMint. The Silver Degen Club, that's on Reddit. I think a lot of my viewers aren't so familiar with Reddit. REDDIT. Put that in your Google search bar, click on it. And then when you get to Reddit, in their search bar, put in Silver Degen Club, DEGEN. And then it's kind of like if you've used Twitter or you've used Facebook. I mean, there's nuances, but you can scroll down, and I'm going to tell you the information, including that given by our friend John here, who's a regular contributor. You will find what I think is some of the most interesting and quality information for anyone who is a silver enthusiast, as I like to call us, including extensive information on this movement that John and I have talked about, #DrainTheMint. If you want to learn more about John, correct me if I'm wrong, but viewers can go to the pickaxe.com, PICKAXE, not .com, .xyz.
Yeah, I was too cheap to pay for the .com. I went for the 99¢. And I got a bunch of people saying, why'd you do that? And I thought, well, it's everything from gold from, ABC all the way to XYZ. But thank you. Yeah, I'll give you those links in the description field. But and you make a good point. Some people focus on YouTube, like you. That's how you, Andy, I know a bunch of people, Manarino, etc. Some people like Reddit. I'm kind of a Twitter guy. It doesn't matter. As long as we're on all the channels firing, whatever, some people work the villages, some the mountainside, some the sea coast, that's what sparks a revolution. We all have to use whatever media we can. There's also getting together and, over a beer, but we don't drink, Ron, but or whatever you want, coffee.
Sure.
And having those awkward conversations that
Yep.
by your pool that have your friends, it's like that Larry David episode where he would put on a hat just to get out of a conversation.
Yeah, if you lived in my neighborhood, you know what you and I would be talking about at the pool.
Yeah, a little bit of silver, a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit of silver.
We're in a cult. We're in a cult,
right? Yeah, the same cult that our founding fathers of our nation were in. And I also want to mention when it comes to the Silver Degen Club, Dumb Money Media, Conrad, and then there's also another gentleman, Illuminated Ape. These are my impression, and from everything that I've learned, they're very good-hearted, high-quality people. They aren't trying to make a big buck off this or anything along those lines. Just really legitimate, good quality guys.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I've gotten to know them since they helped me bring down the Wall Street silver movement through substantive and facts. And so they're not just great content creators. They're actually just altruistic citizens, and extremely, even though a lot of the memes are silly, it's sort of like art is a very important way to change our worldview. Think of the political cartoon, back in showing the fat banker, or even think of the posters that helped a war effort. So they're using, and lots of people go, why the cartoons? Why the silly memes? And it's to spark, first thing you want to do to spark the imagination is spark the attention. And it's we only use about 10% of our brain. The other 90% can be activated through the imagination. Have you ever had a thought in your head, and then you go down the street and you may see that thought that was in your head, and it may be on a billboard or something. And Carl Jung, who studied under Freud, called that synchronicity or mindfulness. You can manifest your future through the subconscious. Now I'm starting to sound like where are my crystals? Silver, gold, and new age crystals, right?
Silver, gold, and crystals. Yeah, we need those crystals.
The spirit, we are one. No, I'm kidding. But
that's why, John, that's why I have a giant stuffed bear blindfolded with 2,500 on his eyes, because I want him to see again. When gold hits 2,500, his blindfold comes off. So
it touched 2,000 3 times, and the triple tops never,
right.
Don't get me into technical analysis.
I know, right? We'll you and I will talk many more times in the future. I'll look forward to that. Don't forget, guys, you can go to the Silver Degen Club, #Drain the Mint. John, thank you so much. Keep
Again,
up
it's my honor. I love your channel, and more than I like your channel, I like the fans that you have, for sure.
Yeah, I do too. They're good people. There's, Ron's Basement's really not me. It's this group of people, and they're quality people, and they care. So we'll see you soon, John. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's my honor. Take care.
Bye-bye.